Hello, this is Math 18, Section 1.6, Exponents. So today we're going to look at simplifying expressions containing exponents. Let me make sure I have my pen here. Alright, so here we go. Anytime that you have repeated multiplication of the same factor, you can write it in a different format using an exponent. So if you have 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2, that's going to give you 2 to the 5th. Now the big number at the bottom is called the base, and the little number at the top is called the exponent. The 5 right there is the exponent, 2 to the 5th. Same thing with a variable. A multiplied 4 times could be written as a to the 4th. So the exponent, the little number at the top, tells you how many times the factor is multiplied by itself. And then the base is the number or the variable that gets multiplied by itself that many times. Whenever it's written out with all of the 2's showing in this multiplication, that's considered factored form. And then when it's written with an exponent, that's called exponential form. Makes sense. So whenever we have a number by itself without, you can have it as 2 to the 1st or just 2, that's usually we do not write the exponent. We usually leave the exponent 1 off. So here we have 2 to the 2nd. It can be read that way, or 2 squared. 2 to the 3rd can also be read as 2 cubed, and then any other exponents after the 3rd are just read as 2 to the 4th, 2 to the 5th, and so on. So whenever we're evaluating an exponent or an exponential expression, basically what you're going to do is write the factor as many times as the exponent tells you to, and then you multiply it out. Now, the difference between these two problems here, this first one with the parentheses, with the -4 and square, and the second one, which also looks like a -4, but it's actually not, without parentheses, these are two totally different problems, and you get two very different answers. So the first one, because it is in parentheses, is read as -4 squared. So you multiply -4 times -4 2 times, and that's going to give you a +16. That one's not too bad. So whenever the negative is in parentheses, you multiply a negative factor however many times the exponent tells you to. Now, the second one, this is a lot harder for students to remember and keep straight. This is not a -4. If it was a -4, it would be in parentheses like the first example. This is read as the opposite of 4, or you can think of there being like a -1 in front of that. Either way. So if we do it both ways, let's look at the two different ways. You can say -1 times 4 squared, which would be 4 times 4. So we have -1 times 16, which gives you -16. Or the other way to think about it is the opposite of 4 squared, where we have an opposite sign out front, and opposite of 4 squared. So 4 times 4 is a +16, and just like back in section 1.1, the opposite of 16 would be -16. Now, both of those are kind of confusing. One way that you can always get this right is if there are no parentheses around your number with the negative sign there, the answer, not the number that you're multiplying, but the answer is always negative all the time. It doesn't matter if what the base is or what the exponent is. If there are no parentheses with an exponent and a negative sign like this, the answer is always negative all the time, no matter what. So let's look at some examples. So on number 1 here, it says evaluate the exponential expression. Okay, so we have in parentheses -3 squared times 2 to the 3rd. Since the -3 is in parentheses, we're going to multiply -3 times -3. Okay, and then we're also going to multiply 2 3 times. 2 times 2 times 2. Alright, so a negative times a negative, two signs are the same, so it's going to be +9. Okay, and then 2 times 2 is 4 times 2 would be 8. So now we multiply 9 times 8 and we get 72. So that would be the answer for number 1. Now look at number 2. We have a -1 to the 6th power. This goes back to the number of negatives, negative factors rule. You have 6 negatives there because that's how many times you're multiplying -1. So you don't have to write out all those ones. Think about it. If we have 6 negative factors, that's going to be a positive because 6 is even. And 1 times 1 times 1 times 1 a whole bunch of times is still going to be 1. So really they're checking to see if you know your sign rules, so be careful. All right, number 3, we have -2 times -3 squared, because it's in parentheses, and then times -1 to the 9th. So that's also in parentheses. So we're going to work this out. We have -2 is just going to come down, and then we have -3 multiplied by itself 2 times. Now, I am not going to write out -1 9 times because I'm lazy. So what you want to do, think about, that's 9 negative factors. So 9 is an odd number, which means it's going to be a negative answer, and 1 multiplied by itself 9 times is still 1. So you get -1 there. Okay? So now we go on to the next step. We bring down -2. We're going to multiply the 2 -3's. That's going to give me a +9 times -1. So now, how many negative factors have you got? Right, 2 negative factors. Okay, so 2 negative factors means we're going to have a positive answer. 2 times 9 is 18, times 1 would be +18. And that would be it. All right, now number 4, this is the one you have to be careful of. See, what you want to see here is there's no parentheses. So what you want to do is just bring that sign into your answer every time. Just bring that negative sign down. And then 7 times 7, 7 squared would be 49, -49. Okay? Now, number 5, the number is in parentheses, so we're going to multiply -2 3 times. So think about the number of negatives there. We have 3 negatives, so that's an odd number of negatives, which means we're going to get a negative answer. And then be careful, 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 would be 8. So, because a lot of people make the mistake of seeing -2 to the 3rd and they go, oh, that's -6. But be careful, make sure you write it out and do the multiplication. All right, and number 6, be careful on this first one. There's no parentheses, okay? So you bring that sign down into that answer, okay? And here we have to figure out what is 2 multiplied 4 times. So 2 times 2 times 2 times 2, okay? And then look, we have a -1 to the 4th power, so that's 4 negatives. That's an even number of negatives, which means that's going to end up to be a +1 there, okay? So we still have our negative sign that we're bringing down for the opposite of 2 to the 4th. And now we're going to multiply these 2's. Well, 2 times 2 is 4. And this 2 times 2 is 4. So 4 times 4 is going to be a -16 for that very first part of the problem. Times 1, bring down your 1, and you get -16 as your final answer. Okay, so here's some for you to try. Pause the video and check these out. Number 1, it's in parentheses, so that's -6 times -6, which is going to be 2 signs are negative the same. It's going to be a +36. Okay? Now, number 2 is no parentheses there. Okay, that's the thing to see. The answer is always negative all the time. And 9 squared, 9 times 9 would be 81. So -81. All right, number 3, we have -2 to the 3rd times -9 squared times -1 to the 7th. So we definitely need to work out the -2 3 times. That's a negative there. Okay, and then we have -9 multiplied twice. Now, I'm not going to write out the ones, but 7 negative factors there. That's an odd number, so that means that's going to be -1. Okay, so because when you multiply 1 by itself a bunch of times, still 1. All right, so we have 3 negative factors on the 2's, so that's going to be a negative. 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 would be 8. Then we have negative 9 times negative 9 would be a positive 81, and then times negative 1. So now we have two negatives, two negative factors. That means it's going to be a positive. And 8 times 81 is what? 648. Is that right? Yep. Times another 1 would still be positive 648. Okay? Number 4. Once again, no parentheses. So that means the sign comes into your answer. And we just have to figure out what is 5 multiplied 3 times. So 5 times 5 is 25 times 5 is going to give me a negative 125. So that'd be the answer there. All right, number 5. We have negative 2. Then we have negative 1 to the 7th power. So that's 7 negatives, which would be a negative answer. Okay, so that's going to be negative 1, because we multiplied that 7 times. And then negative 3 to the 3rd, I'm going to write that out. Negative 3 3 times. Okay, so probably what I would do, I would probably do the first two and then deal with the 3's. Okay, so a negative times a negative is going to be positive 2. And now over here we have 3 negatives, so that's going to be a negative answer because we had an odd number of negatives. 3 times 3 is 9. 9 times 3 would be 27. So now we have a positive times a negative. The signs are different, which means the answer is going to be negative 54. Okay? And number 6, the last one. We have negative 1 to the 8th power. So if you have 8 negatives, remember that's an even number, so that's going to be a positive 1. And then we have times negative 8 squared, so we have to multiply negative 8 2 times. A negative times a negative, the signs are the same. It's going to be 64. And then times the 1 would just give you 64. And that should be it for 1.6.